Welcome back to United USA, the anniversary of March 11, 2011, a Fukushima radioactive disaster, tsunami and earthquake. Having a good weekend. Earthquake, followed by a tsunami, followed by nuclear disaster, at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Basically, the end-all be-all of the point I was trying to make with that highlight reel was just showing that it's still unchallenged, unchecked, still pretty much media blackout, and the government is still silencing information coming out of the power plant. And TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, is still pumping, by their own admission, over 300 metric tons of radioactive waste into the Pacific every day. That's just what they admit. So this is still a problem. They're pumping radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. People say, oh, well, it's a big ocean. It's 1/3 of all the oceans. Yeah, it's a big ocean. But this has been going on for 11 years, and they're doing this daily. Those tanks, the tanks that they have on the property, those have been full since, let me see, 2011 is when it happened. It was probably about 2 years later. So 2013, those tanks were already full, and they've been full for at least 9 years out of the last 11 that I'm aware of. And so, in my personal opinion, just based on their track record of showing how many times that company has lied and deceived the public, I would not be surprised if they're pumping a lot more radioactive water into the Pacific than they actually have admitted. It's an environmental crisis. It's a world health issue. For the love of God, I don't know why. It beats the heck out of me as to why the WHO hasn't jumped on this, and the United Nations. I remember Obama had offered help, but long story short, nothing had ever came of it. Actually, they ended up having pretty much made it clear that they didn't want help, and they kept saying that they had the situation under control. But the fact remains is that they don't have the situation under control, and here it is 11 years later. March 11, 2011, over a decade, still a problem, still they haven't fixed it, still pumping radioactive water into the Pacific. So makes you worry about and wonder about all the sea life. I remember just within a few years after, NOAA, the National Oceanic, I forgot what that department's called, and even National Geographic did like a special, and they had tested the tuna, a school of tuna that made its way and migrated from Japan over to the west coast of the United States, did tissue samples, and all their tissue samples tested positive for radioactive isotopes. Also, the sea lion pup population. Just a few years later, they estimated that approximately 50% of the sea lion babies had 50% had died off, is what they were saying. The starfish population wiped out. You see the rocks on the west coast, on the beach, look really like clean, like they've been bleached. Massive bird die-off. You don't see the amount of seagulls and birds that you used to see at the California beaches. And it's not just California. Obviously, you got the whole west coast of the United States, Canada, all the way up to Alaska, that whole part of Indonesia, Asia, the Philippines, Vietnam, Japan, all that right there. You come down, and don't forget, down in the Pacific, you got Hawaii right here, and then way down in the Pacific, you got Australia. It definitely has had a huge toll on the coral reefs, the Great Barrier Reef, which is absolutely essential to sustaining the ecosystem in the Pacific. And it just has created a domino effect. And I remember around that time it was happening, they were like trying to blame it on El Nino. And they were like, oh, that's ocean temperature and El Nino, and that's the reason why this die-off is happening. I mean, I remember like the year after, they had to suspend salmon fishing in Alaska, I think for like the first time in history or second time in history, I think. Don't quote me on that, but yeah. I mean, in other words, like the people in Alaska depend on their salmon to get them through the winters. You know, it's a fatty meat. It's got a lot of protein and a lot of vitamins. Obviously, the salmon is essential to northerners that live up there, Alaska. It's essential. They had suspended it for a year. Off the coast of Canada, was it BC? I'm trying to think. The sardine fishing population was pretty much wiped out. There was so much that happened. And then to make it even more weird, the radiation detection system that the United States has was shut down that week. I think it was a little bit over a week, And then Obama at the time raised the national radiation limit, I think to like 20 counts per million. I think he raised it to 30 counts per million. 30 CPM is I believe what Obama raised it to. But it was just, it was so obvious it was a cover-up. And as you know, on this channel, I do like to talk about cover-ups and bring light to issues that justifiably should have gotten world recognition and attentions from governments all around the world, specifically the United Nations and the W.H.O. And I don't know, would it be fair to say that it's too late? Yeah, kind of. But that doesn't mean it should be allowed to go unchallenged and unchecked. I mean, that something needs to happen. I don't, I'm not a physicist, I'm not a scientist, so I can't tell you what the solution would be, but I know that whatever they're doing is not working. So something needs to change, or otherwise nothing changes at all.